So there's an Andrew Irvine who once scaled Mount Everest, and there's a Drew Irvin who didn't do that, but he is reaching the summit in sports video game design. He's currently game design manager at PlayStation, MLB The Show, spent about 12 years connected with the ESPN family of networks. So we're going to talk about his story today, how he got to where he is and what makes him inspirational. This is the On to Something podcast. Clearly, Drew is on to something. I'm Bryan Fenley, a national anchor at Fox Sports Radio. So I see all of this experience, Drew, with you working in live sports production. How, when you made the transition into video game and sports related in designing, how did all of that experience working in different assets or facets of sports broadcasting influence the way you're able to do your work today in the realm of virtual reality?
Yeah. Thanks for having me, first of all. And I'm glad I didn't end up like the other Andrew Irvine, because I don't think he made it, if I know the story right.
I don't think he made it. Yeah.
But yeah, anyways, ESPN was just a fantastic place to learn the nuances of television. And I was lucky to work with some legendary directors, producers up and down the line. So I was kind of always taking stuff in, learning camera angles, ways to show graphics, to highlight certain things. And what they're doing in any video game really is a simulation of real life. So it was a pretty easy transition for me when I moved over and just kind of took all that knowledge that I had built up from 12 years working at ESPN. And I'm able to use everything that I've learned in my day-to-day in my current job. So luckily for me, the company I work for was looking for somebody kind of with that knowledge base. And it's made my job, it's definitely not easy, but in terms of like the mental knowledge, the knowledge of cameras and all this stuff, it's already in my head. I just need to kind of get it onto these screens. So yeah, it was fairly nice, easy transition.
What does, with your history of working in live sports, and you've worked tennis, NCAA football, basketball, NFL draft, and baseball, volleyball, the list goes on. What's missing in covering and working with live sports that you get in working in video games?
What's been really cool, Brian, is when I was at ESPN, you'd say, here, you get 4 cameras, cover this baseball game. And obviously you'd like more than that. Or, maybe you have some innovative idea that you want to do, but the resources just aren't there. But in video games, like, I can put a camera wherever I want to put a camera, and it doesn't cost any more money. If I come up with some idea, to put on the score bug or something like that, it doesn't cost anything else. So it really just kind of opens up like I get excited thinking about it from a creative standpoint, because you're not hampered at all by what you can't do. Like, really anything that you think is cool is possible.
In trying out some new things where you're not limited by the resources that you would in a live broadcast, what are some of those creative ideas that you've taken the most pride in introducing and implementing in MLB The Show and in the video game realm?
Yeah, one thing that I think is interesting. So I was a TV producer for a long time, and one of those jobs is you decide when you think the viewer is going to want to see a replay of a play, right? And a lot of times at ESPN, we were taught, like, don't over replay because you're going to miss some live stuff that's happening. So one of the things that I've always thought would be cool when I was at ESPN is if there was like an interactive way the viewers could decide if they wanted to see a replay. So in our game, last year, I basically implemented a button where after the play, if you hit it, you get to see a replay. If you don't hit it, you keep on, the next batter's up, and it keeps going. So we call these our opt-in presentations. So you can kind of choose to watch a replay or not. And then we expanded those to graphics that you see during the game, like starting lineup. If you press the button, the starting lineup pops up and you get to see that presentation. If not, the game just continues on. But we kind of tried to do it in an organic broadcast way, so that when you do opt in to see the starting lineups, then the commentators will talk about it, and we'll show, who's leading the team in batting average or whatever. So anyways, that's just one of those ideas that I thought was a cool thing that I always thought would be great in the TV world that is possible in the video game world.
What goes into facilitating the game analysts and play-by-play broadcasters in terms of logging all the different sound bites and things that they're going to say and how it fits certain moments in video games. What goes into organizing all of that from a broadcast perspective?
Yeah, it's crazy. It's just a lot of writing, a lot of reading, and you always have to be updating. There's so many new players and um, you know new teams and new stadiums, and new trends within the game. So it's just honestly a lot of writing and like um, trying to write like the voice that you're writing for, and them sitting in a recording booth and reading lines.
When you play MLB The Show, how good are you?
um, like a 6 out of 10, probably.
Wait,
It's hard. It's hard to work all day on the game, and then I'm married. I have a 6-month-old kid, and then like grind away at a video game for 4 hours after that. So, I'm better than the average person because of how often I have to have a controller in my hand. But um, I'm not playing in any tournaments or anything like that.
how young were you when you had a controller in your hand for the first time?
I didn't grow up really into video games that much. My friends had Super Nintendo and stuff. I grew up kind of in the middle of the woods. I never had cable growing up either, and I ended up
Wow.
working at ESPN. So it was kind of like just stumbled into it. But I've never been much into like a huge gamer or anything like that. I do think um, what there is to offer now, whether it be any of the top sports video games, is so immersive to the real thing that I think it's pretty cool. Like, it's going to be a very cool thing in the future. How realistic these games are getting.
What was the biggest when you made that transition from ESPN
Mhm.
to video games? Where did you have to have the biggest growth spurt as far as a transition in what you had all of these skills before, but then there was what you didn't know, and then you had to apply yourself and really focus on that as well.
Yeah. So as a producer at ESPN, I was doing more than 100 games a year. So that averages out to about 3 a week. So um, I didn't have time to like think about long-term stuff. It was, what's today? Today's a Tuesday. I've got a basketball game on Wednesday, and then I have a football game on Saturday. So I'm spending like 8 hours today working on this basketball game, and then Thursday and Friday I'm working on this football game, and then Saturday's the game, and you do it all again the next week. So the hardest part was we have, I work on a game that comes out once a year, usually around the start of Major League Baseball season. So you have kind of all year. It's almost like instead of doing 100 games, you have to produce the Super Bowl, but it takes all year to plan for it. So I guess that was the hardest thing, is just the adjustment. I think back to when you're in college, or the difference between having like a class where you have stuff due the whole time, or you just have, there's always that class where like it's a senior thesis where you just have to have a 25-page paper and there's no accountability throughout the entire semester. So it's kind of like going from that, where I guess at ESPN there's like forced accountability, because you've got such tight deadlines. So it's just kind of shifting your mindset to kind of plan in the long term. Luckily,
When
we have some really good internal tools to help with that planning stuff, but it's definitely just a change in workflow.
Yeah, no question. Drew Irvine is with us, game designer, manager extraordinaire, MLB The Show, PlayStation. I'm Bryan Fenley with Fox Sports Radio. So you went to college in Western Washington,
hmm
I'm not mistaken, in the woods. And then how did you end up going from there all the way to ESPN? How did that transition, how was it made possible?
I mean, I owe a lot of people, most people that came to ESPN didn't just stumble upon it. And when I was at Western Washington, there's a director named Prabin Martin who's from Vashon Island, where I grew up. And he actually just got me in the door as a runner. So, I was getting Stuart Scott coffee and driving people around Seattle when they were doing Monday Night Football, or back then the Sonics, rest in peace, and Mariners games, other stuff like that. So I just, I was always accountable, and I always showed up on time, and I was grateful for the paycheck when I was in college. And then I actually applied for a job as a remote PA out after I graduated college, and I didn't actually get the job. It was one of those like, hey, sorry, but we'll keep you, we'll keep you in the Rolodex type thing. And I was like, okay, well, time to start finding a real job now. And a couple months passed, and they called me like out of the blue, and they basically needed more people right away for college football. So within about a week, I flew out to Bristol, and I'd never been east of like Oklahoma in my life.
Wow.
I don't think so. Yeah, flew to Bristol and started life as a what do they call it? Project PA. So I had like a 7-month contract, and I haven't moved back home yet. And it was almost, gosh, it was 15 years ago.
How did Stuart Scott like his coffee?
I just tried to not spill it or burn it or anything. Yeah, I can't remember. I obviously did an okay job though. So if I didn't, they probably would have got rid of me.
What was it like being in his presence?
Yeah, I didn't really know him all that well, but I will say like the only thing I can say is at ESPN, they put all the PAs out in this trailer when I was there. And it was always cool when some of the bigger guys like Stuart Scott would take time to like come in and talk to PAs at that time. And he was one of those people that would kind of come in and just, ask how everybody's doing and that kind of thing. So I don't have any personal relationship with him at all, but I just thought that was always cool.
Oh yeah, to be able to experience that is certainly priceless. As far as the timeline here, you get to ESPN, you got that call. How did that stack up in relation to you thinking, well, I didn't get the job the first time, I'm going to have to go a different way? Like, how ready were you to go one way until you got that call?
Yeah, I mean, I was ready. It was unfortunate because I was a journalism major, and I graduated college in 2007, and unfortunately that's when people kind of stopped reading in general. So I was like, I guess I'm not going the newspaper, magazine, whatever route. So I kind of had to pivot, but at that point I really didn't know what I was going to do. I was actually just helping a friend build a house when ESPN called me. So it was like a total pivot. I was straight out of college and just trying to pay the bills at that point. But yeah, I was lucky to land at ESPN for sure.
Drew Irvine is with us. I'm Bryan Fenley. Do you remember where you were when you took that phone call?
I was at a coffee shop, and it was hard because as exciting as it was still a tough decision. At that point I had a lot of relationships and friends, and my parents and everything I knew was in the Pacific Northwest. So even as exciting of an opportunity that it is, I think it's kind of scary to move across the country and start all over where you don't have anybody within thousands of miles. And I had a lot of great friends back there, and I still do. My parents are still up there, and I miss them a lot. But it was one of those risks that I just couldn't afford not to take. So I remember getting the call and being like very excited and also kind of terrified of what I was about to embark on.
Well, as soon as you made that decision, you said, I'm going to do this. And then you started to think, wow, I'm going on this track and this is what I could do. What would your initial perceptions of where you were going compared to where you did end up going as you went on and on and on, years and years into the business?
Yeah, I honestly didn't know what I was getting into, Bryan, to be frank with you. Like I said, I was a journalism major. I knew how to write, and I knew sports really well. And it was a little intimidating going to ESPN where you're sitting next to guys that just graduated from Syracuse and have all this broadcast knowledge. But it, in a way, it actually kind of helped me. I've always been able to pick up new things, and I'm a naturally curious person, and part of that's why I think I've been able to pick up the video game industry. And in a way, it kind of helped me because the people that were teaching me like the ESPN way or whatever, they didn't have to like reteach me anything. I was learning exactly how they wanted me to do it. And so I think in a way it was almost easier than somebody with this broadcasting background that needs to be retrained. So anyways, it was not what I expected. It was, I have memories of just working crazy hours as a PA in Bristol, and just, learning how TV works from the bottom up. And yeah, made some really good friends back then, and just long nights on the Bristol campus for sure.
I would think crazy hours and long nights would be hand in hand with preparing for an NFL draft, which
Yeah,
you did
for
with
sure.
ESPN. And people don't realize how many hours, how much time and preparation in collecting of footage, which is not always easy to access, goes into putting on these incredible broadcast productions during the draft. What was it like from your vantage point in helping put together all of these clips and make
Yeah.
these broadcasts possible?
I'm really glad you asked that, because whenever I'm watching the draft now, especially in my post ESPN life with other friends and stuff, when when the highlight videos come up of the guy that you just drafted, I always tell them, like, you guys have no idea how much
Wow.
work actually went into just like that 30-second piece that just aired, which most people kind of aren't even really paying attention to that much. I mean, I'd like to think that they are. Um, but yeah, it's like, I remember when I was there, you get several conferences to work on. I do remember I was on like the SEC, and then I wanted the Pac-12 because I was from out here. So you get a couple conferences, and then you go through the top 250 prospects or whatever. So if you have the SEC is obviously a pretty big load. And when I was on the draft, we still had to go get the tapes from the videotape library, which is like huge in Bristol. So you'd bring your bucket down to the library. I remember like Randall Cobb was a player that was in the draft class that I worked on. So you would look up his game log, and it's like, okay, Randall Cobb had over 100 yards receiving in these 4 games. So then you would pull those tapes. And by tapes, I mean the melt, which is basically every angle of every good play in the game. And then you'd go to a tape deck and you'd scroll through Randall Cobb stuff all day long until you found like 6 to 8 plays or whatever it may be. And then you would actually, at that point, you'd have to go ingest all the plays that you want and then cut it up using video editing software, but then would then go to another editor that would kind of color correct it. They usually have some sort of graphics that they put on it so you know who the player is and all that stuff. So it's pretty unbelievable that each player literally almost takes a day, solid
Wow.
8 to 10 hours to get that 30-second clip together.
And how many, and this is something that you are working on, how long before the actual broadcast and the draft happens?
Well, pretty much right after college football ends. So, yeah, January, I would say, for an April draft.
Wow.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
Drew Irvin is with us, game design manager, MLB The Show. I'm Bryan Fenley with Fox Sports Radio. How often, even though you're not in the ESPN space right now, do you find yourself watching sports and seeing how you would have done things, or you can't help but critique just knowing your experiences and what you would do in certain situations watching a sporting event?
Definitely. Well, first of all, yes, I love sports. I've actually watched more sports now than when I was at ESPN, because
Oh,
I have weekends off. Like the one problem with working at ESPN is if you either are working or traveling almost every weekend and major holiday and all that. So you miss a ton of, I worked on college football for years, so I would travel back and miss all NFL Sunday, or whatever you're working on. You're usually traveling or on the air or whatever. So it's a lot easier to watch sports when you have like closer to a 9 to 5 type job. But to answer your production, it's impossible to not watch sports without saying, like, why wouldn't they have used the cart camera to see if the guy got a first down? And what you realize too is when you're in the thick of it in the TV truck, there's always a reason. Maybe the camera was blocked and you don't know, but when you're watching at home, you're always kind of watching it through that lens of like, that's odd that they did it this way or didn't show this replay angle, or why a graphic on the screen was missing this statistic or whatever it may be. But yeah, it's pretty hard to unravel that from your brain. I wish I could. I'd like the non-TV friends that I have probably like are super annoyed when I'm always commenting on, what camera angles are being used. They're
But
just like, come on, man. We just care about who's scoring touchdowns here.
You're in the right business and you are made for this business when you have those sort of thoughts that are generated in your mind.
Mm,
Drew, this is my last question. Looking through the lens of your son, and as your son gets older and he sees what you do as
yeah.
somebody that works in video games, what is it going to be like the first time you play a video game with him, imagining this
It'll
moment and knowing that you played a part in putting it together?
it'll be super cool. I can't wait. I'm like in my head, I'm like, he can't talk yet. He's 6 months old. So I sometimes say to him, I'm like, you probably don't even know how cool it is yet that I work for PlayStation. Like you're gonna have all your friends wanting to come over and play latest
Yes.
games and everything, and you're always gonna have all the games you want and stuff. So I don't know. I think it's gonna be hard actually as a dad, is like, because I grew up playing sports all day long. Like I didn't, and I want him to be out doing stuff. So I'm already worried about like how to limit the time he plays PlayStation, because it's kind of hypocritical, where he comes in, sees me working, and I always have a PlayStation controller in my hand.
I feel like you're going to be living your childhood through him because, as you said, you didn't play that many video games. You'd go over to your friends, but now I think you're going to play a lot as he
Yeah.
gets at a certain formative age where he can play, and it'll be a really fun bonding experience, no doubt. And
Yeah.
how lucky he is to have you as a dad. Drew Irvine, MLB The Show, PlayStation Game Design Manager. I'm Bryan Fenley. This was so much fun, man. Thanks for making the time.
It was awesome, Brian. Thank you.